Imagine for a second that you are sitting in a packed stadium, like a massive crowd, and the speaker on stage is just, well, they're charismatic, they're powerful, and they are just tearing into all of your worst enemies one by one.
Oh, and the crowd is going wild. I mean, they are loving it.
Exactly. Yeah, you're sitting there as the third person in this scenario, cheering at every single takedown, feeling, incredibly vindicated.
Right, because they're saying all the things you've always wanted to hear.
Yes. But then, right at the climax of the speech, the speaker locks eyes with you, and suddenly all that righteous judgment they were pouring out on your enemies, it is turned squarely on you.
Which is just a completely devastating pivot.
It really is. Well, welcome to the deep dive. We are so, so glad you're pulling up a chair to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for being here with us.
Today on the table, we have this absolutely fascinating stack of historical and textual research surrounding, well, an ancient text. Specifically, the first chapter of the book of Amos.
A truly incredible piece of history.
Right. And our mission today is to explore how this manuscript, which was written, over 3,700 years ago, used a brilliant psychological trap to completely redefine human morality, earthly power, and even divine authority.
It really is a masterclass in prophetic rhetoric.
Yeah.
I mean, because we aren't just looking at some dusty old scroll here.
No, not at all.
We're looking at a radical shift in how humanity viewed the rules of the universe itself. But to understand the sheer shock value of this trap,
Yeah.
we first have to really understand the audience that they walked right into it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the setting is key. Starting with the historical grounding from the research, our sources place us roughly between 760 and 750 BC.
Right in the middle of the 8th century.
Yeah, and we are looking at a divided kingdom. So you've got Israel in the north, which is ruled by King Jeroboam II, and Judah in the south under King Uzziah.
Right.
And from a purely geopolitical standpoint, things are going remarkably well for them, right?
Oh, exceedingly well. Like, this is a recognized golden age of relative prosperity and stability for both kingdoms.
Which is pretty rare back then.
It's extremely rare. The major regional superpowers of the time, like Assyria, well, they were dealing with their own internal issues.
So they weren't really bothering anyone else.
Exactly. They weren't actively threatening the borders of Israel or Judah. And because of that power vacuum, Israel and Judah expanded their territories. They controlled these vital trade routes. And honestly, wealth was just pouring in.
Just a total economic boom.
Yeah. They were comfortable, well-fed, and feeling incredibly secure in their position on the global stage.
To make that mindset relatable to, the modern day, think about a modern analogy, but push it beyond just a hyper-toxic corporate culture.
Oh, it was way beyond that.
Right. Imagine a rigged legal system where ruthlessly destroying the competition, executing hostile takeovers, and completely bankrupting someone else's livelihood isn't just accepted. It's legally viewed as evidence that the judge and jury are actually on your side.
That's a great way to frame it.
Right. Like, if you win a case, you are automatically presumed innocent and righteous simply because you won. In the ancient Near East, the concepts of war and victory were entirely built around that kind of twisted justification.
That is a much more accurate parallel, yeah.
Yeah.
In the ancient world, acts of absolute brutality actions we would instantly classify as horrific war crimes today, they were actually considered honorable.
Honorable, which is so hard to wrap our heads around.
It is. But from the perspective of power, these acts were undeniable evidence of military might and, crucially, proof of divine blessing.
So the gods were on your side if you were violent enough.
Exactly. The logic was horrifyingly simple, If a king conquered a neighbor and decimated their population, it meant his god was stronger than the neighbor's god, and it explicitly granted him the mandate to dominate.
I mean, the sources mention acts that are hard to even read about today. Things like threshing enemies with iron sledges, selling entire populations into slavery, or desecrating corpses.
Just utter brutality.
Yeah. And if an ancient king did that, he wasn't hauled off to an international tribunal. He threw a parade. His people celebrated it as a glorious triumph.
Right. And this is where Amos steps into this prosperous, victorious society and does something completely unthinkable.
Yeah, he totally disrupts it.
He refuses to look at these actions through the eyes of the conquering king. Instead, he looks at them through the eyes of the victims.
He flips the entire script.
What's fascinating here is how Amos completely shifts the vocabulary of geopolitics. Like, he takes these culturally celebrated military victories and relabels them as transgressions against humanity.
Wow.
He calls them sins. And by doing that, he is declaring that there is an objective moral standard that exists far above the whims of any earthly king.
Or the territorial claims of any local deity, right?
Exactly.
So he is basically standing in the middle of a victory parade saying, I don't care if you won the battle, and I don't care if your society gave you a medal for it. What you did was fundamentally wrong.
Precisely. He adopts the perspective of the victims and boldly declares that this victim-centric perspective is actually God's perspective.
Which was unheard of.
Utterly alien concept in 750 BC.
But wait, if you are Amos and you want to deliver this incredibly radical, uncomfortable message to an audience of wealthy elites who, think they are the center of the universe, you can't just walk up and tell them their whole worldview is corrupt.
No, they'd laugh you out of town.
The worst, they would tune you out instantly. So how does he actually get them to listen?
He uses a delivery mechanism designed to exploit their own biases. It's an entrapment strategy, basically.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, and it starts with this rhythmic, repetitive formula that acts as a hook.
The numerical staircase. Our research highlights this heavily. Amos stands up and starts chanting, "For 3 transgressions and for 4, I will not relent."
Which is such a powerful rhetorical device.
Let me pause there and ask, why 3 and 4? Why not just say, hey, you have committed many crimes. What is this staircase actually doing to the listeners?
Well, it is a poetic device of escalation. In ancient Near Eastern poetry, the n and n plus 1 formula, like 3 and 4, it builds this rhythmic chanting tension.
So it's not actual math.
No, it isn't a literal mathematical equation. It implies an overflowing cup of guilt. It essentially means you sin once, twice, 3 times, and now this 4th time breaks the camel's back.
I see.
It creates an anticipation in the audience. They're waiting for the final damning blow to fall.
And he uses that rhythm to slowly tighten a geographical noose around Israel. Let's trace this out because the narrative through line of his speech is brilliant.
It's extremely calculated.
Right. He doesn't just randomly list nations. He starts up north with Damascus, the region of Aram. And the indictment there is extreme cruelty and war. Specifically, Amos calls out the threshing of Gilead.
The physical reality of that is staggering. I mean, a threshing sledge is a heavy wooden board embedded with iron spikes or sharp stones underneath.
And farmers used it to separate grain from the chaff.
Right. So using agricultural machinery to physically crush human beings, it's a level of methodical, industrialized destruction that is just hard to even fathom.
And our sources note the historical fulfillment of this, too. It wasn't just an empty threat from Amos.
No, it actually happened.
He prophesied that Damascus would fall because of this, and later the Assyrian Empire actually did conquer them, deported their population to a place called Kir, and completely ended their monarchy.
The judgment had real teeth. So from Damascus in the north, Amos moves down the Mediterranean coast to Gaza, representing the Philistines.
Okay, so swinging southwest.
Right. And their crime wasn't just typical warfare. It was the systematic capture and selling of entire communities into slavery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were sweeping up whole towns, men, women, and children, purely for economic profit.
Then he targets Tyre, just up the coast. Tyre is indicted for participating in that exact same slave trade, handing vulnerable populations over to Edom. But the text adds a really specific detail.
Yeah, it does.
Tyre is condemned for breaking covenants of brotherhood. What exactly does that mean in an ancient political context?
It means they betrayed formal diplomatic treaties. In the ancient world, nations would often forge alliances sealed with sacred oaths, literally calling each other brother.
But they just toss that aside.
Exactly. Tyre threw those treaties out the window the moment it became economically advantageous to sell people as commodities.
Right.
They traded human dignity for wealth.
So from the coast, the noose tightens inward. Amos points to Edom, just to the southeast. Edom's crime is relentless hostility toward their own blood relative, Israel.
Right, going all the way back to their origins.
Yeah, historically, Edom traced its lineage to Esau, while Israel traced its lineage to Jacob. They were literally brother nations. But Edom disregarded those family bonds to pursue perpetual anger and violence.
And then Ammon, right across the Jordan River.
This one is intense.
The indictment here is almost unspeakably violent. Ammon is condemned for targeting pregnant women, literally ripping them open. And the research points out the motivation for this horror. The text says it was simply to enlarge their borders.
So they were committing ultimate atrocities for the sake of drawing a slightly larger line on a map.
Yes, just unchecked greed and cruelty.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Put yourself back in the stadium. Put yourself in the shoes of the Israelite audience in 750 BC.
Okay, I'm there.
You are hearing this prophet systematically call out Damascus, Gaza, Tyre, Edom, Ammon. These are your historical rivals.
Oh, absolutely.
These are the neighbors who have raided your towns, threatened your borders, and committed horrors against your people.
So you are absolutely cheering at this point. You are caught up in the rhythm. For 3 transgressions and for 4.
You are thinking, yes, tell him, Amos, God is finally going to smash our enemies for being so evil.
Right.
The audience is enthusiastically validating this divine condemnation, but by cheering, they are stepping right into the trap.
Precisely. By agreeing that Damascus and Ammon deserve divine punishment for their cruelty, the Israelite audience is unknowingly consenting to a massive theological premise.
Which is
They're agreeing that there is a standard of universal morality.
because Amos is holding these foreign nations accountable to rules they didn't even know existed.
Exactly.
Like Damascus didn't have the law of Moses, Gaza didn't worship the God of Israel. But Amos is establishing that it doesn't matter. He is saying you violated basic human decency, and God is holding you accountable regardless of your local laws.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this requires a complete redefinition of the divine. You cannot have a universal law without a universal judge.
Right.
If Amos is establishing this universal moral law, who exactly is he claiming enforces it?
Well, this is where the research highlights the messenger formula. When Amos is listing off these crimes, he keeps repeating the phrase, "Thus says the Lord."
Which is crucial.
Today, to modern ears, that just sounds like standard religious jargon, you know? But back then, it was a highly specific political device.
It was formal, diplomatic language. Thus says the great king was the phrasing used by royal messengers when delivering an edict from an emperor to a vassal state.
So Amos isn't just a street preacher shouting on a corner. He is presenting himself as a celestial diplomat.
Yes, he did.
He is walking into the town square and serving an official divine indictment on behalf of a sovereign ruler.
And that ruler is Yahweh. But the way Amos presents Yahweh is in stark contrast to how everyone else in the ancient Near East viewed their gods.
How so?
The differences here fundamentally rewrote ancient political science.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. When we discuss this, it's easy to assume ancient kings were just cynically using religion to justify their cruelty. But didn't they genuinely fear their gods? It couldn't have just been a political game, right?
Oh no, they absolutely fear them. But the nature of those gods dictated how that fear was expressed.
Yeah.
According to the historical texts, ancient Near Eastern local gods were derived from the physical universe. They were born from matter or born from other gods. They were essentially superpowered beings operating within the system.
Right. Well, Yahweh is presented as eternal, immaterial, and transcendent. He isn't part of the universe. He is the creator of it.
Which completely changes the character of the divine. Because local gods were part of nature, they were often unpredictable and capricious, just like a storm or a drought.
You never knew what you were going to get.
Exactly. And they were also tied to very specific geography. If you crossed a river, you were in a different god's territory.
So your worship wasn't really about moral alignment at all. It was a transaction.
Highly transactional.
It was a bribe. You sacrifice a ram, you do the right ritual, and you hope the local god gives you rain or, helps you crush your enemy.
Exactly.
Right.
But Yahweh is described as uniformly righteous and sovereign over all nations, regardless of borders.
Oh, wow. So geography didn't matter.
Not at all. And because he cannot be bribed or manipulated with rituals, he demands a heart of righteous devotion. The prophets continually state that Yahweh actively rejects religious rituals that lack moral substance.
You can't just buy him off.
No, you cannot buy his favor with sacrifices if you are simultaneously exploiting your neighbor.
So the ethical scope is entirely different. A local god just wants their specific king to win battles and bring them loot. But Yahweh holds all nations, even the ones that don't acknowledge him, accountable for how they treat human beings.
Amos isn't just reciting theology here. He is launching a revolutionary assertion that divine sovereignty cares deeply about human decency across all borders.
Okay, so let's set the scene again. The crap is laid, the universal judge is established, the objective moral standard of human decency is agreed upon by the crowd.
They're bought in.
They are on their feet, they are cheering, as the celestial diplomat hands down indictments against all the surrounding nations. So how does Amos spring the trap?
The chanting rhythm continues, but the target suddenly shifts. He turns to the crowd and says, "For 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4 I will not relent."
Wow. The air must have gone completely out of the room.
Complete dead silence. I mean, Amos has just established that God judges nations for violating basic human dignity. Now, he turns that exact same standard on Israel and Judah.
And we have to remember, they considered themselves set apart.
Oh,
But they weren't set apart because they were morally flawless. I mean, the source material is very clear that Amos spends the rest of his book heavily detailing their corruption.
yeah, he lays into them.
So why did they feel so immune? Did they think being God's people was essentially a shield of immunity?
This raises an important question about their history. Israel looked back at events like the Exodus, where they were rescued, and they developed a pretty twisted view of their covenant.
How do you see it?
They essentially thought, God chose us, therefore God is exclusively on our side no matter what we do. They thought the covenant was a blank check for protection.
Like, we are in the club, so we can't be touched.
Exactly. But Amos is telling them that the covenant is actually a higher level of accountability.
Oh, that is quite the flip.
It is. They weren't chosen just to be protected. They were explicitly called to live by a specific ethical code of the law. They were supposed to be a kingdom of priests meant to reflect God's justice and mercy to the rest of the world.
So while the other nations, Damascus, Ammon, Gaza, were judged for violating basic universal human dignity, Israel was being judged for violating the very standard of holiness they actively claimed to represent.
And their failure was glaring, especially when you look at the economic mechanics of that 760 BC prosperity boom we mentioned earlier.
Right. Let's look at the reality on the ground there. That wealth we talked about, it wasn't trickling down.
Not at all.
The research shows that during this golden age, the wealthy classes in Israel were using legal loopholes to brutally exploit the poor.
They were forcing people into debt slavery over trivial amounts of money. Amos specifically calls them out for selling the needy for a pair of sandals.
A pair of sandals? That is just sickening.
It really is. The elites were throwing massive, lavish religious festivals to celebrate their prosperity, assuming God was thrilled with them. But those festivals were funded by the extortion of their own citizens.
So Amos is basically looking at this wealthy, self-satisfied crowd and saying, you just cheered when I said God hates cruelty and oppression. Well, God hates your cruelty and oppression too. And honestly, you should have known better.
It is a devastating critique of hypocrisy. It shatters the illusion that you can separate your religious identity from your ethical behavior.
The two are permanently linked.
Yes. For Amos, it doesn't matter how loud your songs are or how many sacrifices you bring. How you treat the weakest member of your society is the only true metric of your relationship with the divine.
It is incredibly powerful, and it brings us right back to you listening to this right now. Why is a deep dive into an ancient text from 2,700 years ago matter to us today?
It's a great question.
Because Amos is delivering a timeless, deeply uncomfortable warning about the danger of pointing fingers.
It is human nature to focus on the flaws of our rivals while completely ignoring our own.
It is so easy and honestly so satisfying to cheer when our enemies, whoever they might be in our modern context, are called out for their wrongdoings.
Oh, absolutely.
We all love to watch the other side get taken down a peg, but the brilliance of Amos's rhetorical trap is that it is still springing today.
It absolutely is.
He forces us to stop looking outward and start looking inward. He challenges us to examine the ethical codes we so loudly claim to hold ourselves and asks if we are actually living up to them.
Are we demanding justice for others while turning a blind eye to our own compromises?
Exactly.
It is a standard that simply doesn't allow anyone to remain comfortable in their own self-righteousness.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a thought to mull over, building on this idea of Amos as a celestial diplomat handing down indictments.
Okay, what is it?
If a celestial diplomat were to step into our world today, right now looking completely past our borders, our political parties, and our carefully crafted national narratives, what culturally celebrated actions or glorious victories of our modern era might be shockingly reframed as transgressions against humanity?
Wow. It certainly makes you wonder who would be on that hit list today.
And more importantly, it makes you wonder if we would still be cheering when the speech was over.